Please turn to page 152 for content vocabulary diagrams. At the beginning of this chapter, I discussed that we needed to constantly have writing integrated into your core subjects. And then I presented two different activities, lecture notes and the content vocabulary diagrams. We already went through the lecture notes, but at this point, we're looking at the content vocabulary diagram when you know I need to give information, I need to give my children background about the subject we are studying about. What a plant is, what a volcano is, what is a cell, the subject that you are studying about. And I also need to introduce topical words, vocabulary words that are specific to that content. Then you use this activity. So we're trying to do two things at the same time. Give background about content and vocabulary, but at the same time, show our children how to organize information to write a descriptive paragraph. Therefore, this front-loading activity is extremely powerful because, again, you will integrate writing even though your students may not have the background, the vocabulary, and the understanding of the content yet because you're the giver of the information. The tools you'll need for this lesson: a chart displayed for your students so that they have the steps in order to organize a descriptive paragraph. The good news is we have an 8.5 by 14 legal size paper that you can download in the 2-3 Writing Online Training Table of Contents so that you can present it to your students. You could make a chart just like this one right behind me, the one viewed on your page, or you can just print up the chart ready-made, which I suggest so that you don't have to do all that work. You have that chart displayed for your students to follow along the steps as you present the lesson. I've also included a section from your manual. The section that I included was the description organizer, keywords, and also a definition of what a descriptive paragraph is. This is just a resource for you to use as we go through this activity. Let's go ahead and let's get started. Almost every lesson that I present to the students, they will have a blank piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, and you will have a blank piece of paper. Because you are the giver of the information, you're going to be drawing pictures, labeling parts, and they're going to follow along. And as you draw and label, you'll stop and orally rehearse different sentences that you will create from the information that you put on the paper. So they have a blank piece of paper, you have a blank piece of paper presented on the document viewer, or you could have a large piece of butcher paper that you display up on your board for them to follow along. We're ready for our content diagram. Notice on page 153, I have a completed content diagram of a volcano with different vocabulary listed and the function of the parts. This is a completed content diagram, but in order for you to understand this activity, we will start with a blank piece of paper and we'll walk through the steps so that you can see how this activity actually works. You are going to write all this information with keywords, simple drawings, and the students will be recording that simultaneously. As you do this activity and you record different information, you'll stop and you'll orally rehearse it so it sounds like writing. Because in the end, the students will be able to orally rehearse all the information that you record and finally write it down so that it becomes a descriptive paragraph. Although your example in your book was of a volcano, I thought it would be worthwhile for you to do a different content vocabulary diagram so that you would have this and the volcano one to use as a reference. Therefore, you're working with your children, you know you're going to start a spider unit, and you know that your kids need to have many different vocabulary words that are specific to the content for a spider, so you decide, I need to front load the information, but they need the vocabulary, so I will do a content vocabulary diagram. The kids have the paper, you're ready to start. Boys and girls, we're going to be studying about spiders. In order to understand about spiders, you need to know all the different parts of it. So everyone look at me and say, what's the big idea about a spider? What is a spider? So I have the children say that and I tell them, thank you for asking. Let's go up to the top of our page and let's put an equal sign. And everyone go like this, say definition, definition. I need a definition of what a spider is. So we're going to put our equal sign there. And at the beginning of our equal sign, we're going to write the word spider. S-P-I-D-E-R. And we'll write it down. We'll say the spelling really quickly so the kids write it quickly. After we have the word spider, we need a definition. And when we say a definition, we're going to define what a spider is. Now, this is going to be more of a descriptive piece of writing for background. You can either give a full-blown definition like you would get from a dictionary, or sometimes you can use just a basic description, overall big picture description. So if I was doing a cone volcano, looks like an upside down ice cream cone. A spider, and then I could just say is an arachnid, or I could give an overall description of a spider. A spider has 2 body parts and 8 legs. So you have to decide what you think would be the best for your kids. Let's look at the big picture of what a spider is. It has 2 body parts. So I'm going to just draw 2 little circles with the number 2 next to it and 8 legs. And then I'm going to just put some pointy little legs there. So what does it have, boys and girls? It has 2 body parts and 8 legs. Let's go back now and let's have our definition. A spider has 2 body parts and 8 legs. The children orally rehearse that. Then we draw a line. So once we have that topic sentence, that definition, now we're going to go to the body of our organizer. In the body, we will have a description. And what do we do when we have a description? Draw a picture, label the parts, describe them, and tell the function of the parts. When we're looking at the function of the parts, what are we looking at? What is it? How it works? Why it's important? Or what it does? The job of those parts. We are going to do the body of our organizer. Let's draw a line on the bottom. We know the top box is our topic sentence, and in this case, a definition. The body will be our description, and then the bottom will be our conclusion. What is a spider? A spider has 2 body parts and 8 legs. Let's go to the body. Draw a picture. We will draw our spider. There's the top of the body, and the top of the body has the head fused to it, so it's 1 body part. The top of the body is called the cephalothorax. Then we have the second part, which is called the abdomen. Let's now draw the legs. So we know we need to have 8 legs, and we're going to make them stick out from the cephalothorax. Also, at the bottom of the abdomen, we're going to have our spinnerets. So let's write legs and spinnerets. Sticking out from the top of the cephalothorax is also where the head is and fangs. So let's write fangs. I have drawn a picture and labeled important vocabulary words I know my students need to understand in order to go into our spider unit. We'll go back to the body and we will actually circle these different parts and put a description word on top of each circle and the function of each part below. Let's go back and do that. First to the cephalothorax. Put a circle and let's put a little box there. We want to have a function box right here, and we're going to ask, what does the cephalothorax do? What's its job? What is it? How does it work? Or why is it important? I'm going to choose one of those ideas. What is it? What's inside of the cephalothorax? Oh, the heart and lungs. So the spider can bring in air, and also it can pump its blood so that it can live. Oh, there's the function of the cephalothorax. A spider has 2 body parts and 8 legs. One of the body parts is the cephalothorax. Inside it are the heart and lungs that bring in air and pump blood throughout its body. Excellent! We understand what that part is. Let's go to the fangs. So we'll circle the fangs, and now we'll put a drop box here. The drop box again is the job, the function of the fangs. The fangs are filled with venom. So we're going to write venom here, or poison. So the spider can inject it in its prey to kill it so that it can then eat it. A spider has 2 body parts and 8 legs. The top part of the spider is the cephalothorax. That's where it has its heart and lungs, so it can breathe in air and pump blood throughout its body. Sticking out from the top of the cephalothorax are its fangs. The fangs are filled with venom, so it can kill its prey. Notice every time that I write down new information, I explain it to the children, then we go back and we orally rehearse all this information together. Notice I'm using body motions so I can pull in all those different learning modalities of the student in my room. So I put down information, we stop, I'm discussing what it means, then we go back and we orally rehearse this description. Every time I go back to orally rehearse it, I don't have to say it the exact same way. As a matter of fact, I may come up with a better way to say these different sentences, which shows children, and you want to point that out to them, ooh, we keep practicing this, and look how I made those sentences better. I'm revising through my oral language practice. This is really critical that you say this to the students, and they constantly go back and rehearse this description. I can't leave this part of the body because I still have one other body part that is sticking out from that cephalothorax, and that's the 8 legs. Boys and girls, we have 8 legs on that spider. Let's circle 8 legs and put our drop box. What's the function? What's the job of those 8 legs? The 8 legs are going to help the spider hunt for its food. You're not going to believe what these 8 legs can do. They can actually detect sound, motion, air currents, and sense. Those legs are really important. Let's go back and let's say this entire piece of writing again. A spider has 2 body parts with 8 legs. The top of the body is the cephalothorax, which has the lungs and heart. The lungs takes in air and brings oxygen to its body, while the heart pumps the oxygen and blood throughout it so that it can have energy. Sticking out from the top of the cephalothorax are the fangs. The fangs are filled with venom, so a spider can poison its prey. 8 legs help the spider hunt by smelling the scents in the air, feeling the motions and sounds. Let's go to the abdomen. The abdomen has many different jobs, but we're going to focus on the fact that it has glands inside of it. And these glands are going to make the spider's web. So inside the abdomen, which is on the lower part of the body, are glands that make the web for the spider. From those glands, it needs to have something that weaves the silk together to make the webs, and those are the 6 spinnerets. They are going to produce and weave the web. So the spinnerets will produce and weave the web. We have our vocabulary. We've labeled it with the function. The last thing we may want to do is go back and see, do we need to add some fancy words? I think we definitely need to go back because we don't have to have describing words for all these, but the fangs, I think we should put sharp fangs. On the 8 legs, I think it's really important that we label that they are hairy 8 legs so that you understand the hair on the legs can detect the sound, detect the scent, detect the motion. And I think the 6 spinnerets, maybe we put the busy six spinnerets because they're always working to make those webs. Let's go back and let's repeat so far what we have on our content vocabulary diagram. Remember, the top part is your topic sentence, which is a definition. We're doing this an equal sign for definition. Then we have our body, which is filled with a description of all the parts, in this case of a spider. And when we have that description, what do? We drew a picture, labeled the important parts, told the function of those parts, the job, and went back and added fancy words if needed. We have our description. We're orally rehearsing it, we're acting it out. I'm having the students turn to each other, orally rehearse this description. We're going to finish with a conclusion. On the bottom, we'll put our equal sign, and we'll go back up and remind our reader in this conclusion, what was the big idea? What were we talking about? So we're going to have a definition again, because what are we going to do? We're going to end this paragraph, this description, by repeating that big idea, but we want to use different words. We could say a spider, or what's another way that we could say this? An arachnid, a eight-legged creature. I think I'm going to say creature. And maybe I'll say eight-legged. We up here said that it had these different body parts. So I already mentioned the body parts here and that it's a creature. What's another definition that I could put here? Oh, an interesting arachnid. So let's put arachnid in there. At the bottom, we had our conclusion. The eight-legged creature is an arachnid, an interesting arachnid. We're ending our description with this because that's our conclusion. And on our description, what the conclusion is repeating the topic sentence using different words. And our topic sentence is basically a description or a quick big picture of whatever the subject is that we're describing. So on the bottom, we went back and said, well, what is it that we're talking about? A spider. What's another way to say spider? Eight-legged creature. Has two body parts and 8 legs. I already said eight-legged creature here. Let's take the word spider. Let's use arachnid. Is an interesting arachnid. So there we have our conclusion to wrap up our description. Next, I will have all my students orally rehearse this together over and over and over again. I'm walking around the room listening to students. Students who have control over this description will then go and write it down. Students who need more practice will come with me and we will orally rehearse it so that they understand the concepts and they have a grasp of the language in order to produce this type of writing. The key is you have to be able to say it in order to write it. So in this case, we would listen to the students and they would be able to say, a spider has 2 body parts and 8 legs. On the top of its body is the cephalothorax, which houses the lungs and heart to help it breathe and carry oxygen and blood throughout its body. The sharp fangs are at the top of the cephalothorax, carrying venom to poison its prey. Sticking out from the top of the body are 8 hairy legs, so it can detect smell, motion, air currents, and sound. On the bottom of its body is the abdomen, filled with glands to make the silk for its web. This 8-legged creature is an interesting arachnid. Again, the boys and girls are orally going to rehearse this over and over again, and then they will write it down. This is a fabulous way for your students to retain topical vocabulary. Why? Because the vocabulary words are connected to a visual image that also has the function of those words on that same page. There's so many different types of vocabulary words. For content words, this type of diagram with the vocabulary labeling is probably one of the best ways to help them retain these words, remember the function of them, and retrieve them easily so that when they read or write, use these words with ease. On page 153, I have a finished visual of a descriptive vocabulary diagram for a volcano. Up at the top, we had our definition. In the middle, we had our description where we labeled the parts, told the function of the parts, and then at the bottom, we had our conclusion. The children orally rehearsed this out, and then they wrote a description paragraph of a cone volcano. The question as you start going through this chapter may be, what is the difference between content vocabulary diagrams and descriptive writing that I will show you a little later in this chapter? Nothing except for the fact that you, the teacher, are the giver of the information. The whole idea of the content vocabulary diagrams is to teach children how to write descriptive paragraphs and also to give them background about a subject and the vocabulary for that subject. In this case, on this page, you see a volcano. We're ready to start a volcano unit. I know my kids may not know what a cone volcano is, and I know there's a lot of vocabulary that they need to know to understand this volcano, to read more about volcanoes, and to later write about it. So what do? I front load using a content vocabulary diagram. Also knowing that the steps that we go through to make this description are the same steps later that they will use when they're writing their own descriptions about anything that they've learned in science, social studies, any core subjects. This content vocabulary diagram is not only a way for you to front load information, to provide students with that understanding of the steps of how to write a description, but also when they're reading and they notice that the author is giving them all this background, all kinds of vocabulary words and definitions of the subject that they're reading about, they can immediately take notes by drawing a picture of the subject, putting the vocabulary words on that picture and the function of those parts, actually the definition of those words. This is a way for them to understand descriptive writing in their reading, and then to take notes that way. And finally, when they go to write their own information, if they need a description, they have it right there for them to pull for their own descriptive writing. This technique is for you to front load, for your children to take to reading comprehension, as well as for them to use when they're independently writing their own descriptions. Good luck. I hope that you find this activity engaging, and I hope that your students retain those vocabulary words and the knowledge they need to cover all their academic subjects.